A light rain tapped against the roof of Robert's rental car as he steered into the curved driveway of the Maplewood Hotel. He had just driven 3 hours from his suburban home to the bustling city, and his eyes traveled across the expansive glass entrance as he pulled up. The headlights illuminated sleek letters spelling out the hotel's name in a gentle glow. More than once, he had stayed in similar hotels for these frequent business meetings and conferences, but each time carried a twinge of excitement and anxiety all its own. He parked, brushed raindrops from his shoulders, and tugged his rolling suitcase out of the trunk. Inside the bright lobby, the hum of a small fountain filtered through overhead music. Plush couches and polished side tables offered a welcoming arrangement. People wandered in and out in a steady flow, many chattering into phones or dragging travel-worn luggage behind them. Robert approached the front desk with a polite smile, adjusting the collar of his dress shirt. "Welcome to the Maplewood," said a neatly dressed receptionist, a young man who spoke in soft, measured tones. "How can I help you?" "I have a reservation under Robert Martin," he answered, resting his palms on the counter. The man tapped rapidly on the keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Martin. We have you for 4 nights, correct?" "That's right." Robert waited for the key cards. He reminded himself to remain composed. There was nothing unusual about his visit on the surface, another business trip. But for Robert, these trips gave him a sliver of time when he could indulge in wearing the clothes he'd always been drawn to, experimenting with styles and outfits in the privacy of a hotel room. Here, away from his everyday life, he knew he could explore without the usual pressure or watchful eyes. He had done this discreetly many times, always careful to hide it from the world. The receptionist slid 2 key cards across the counter. "Room 1427, top floor, with a city view. Enjoy your stay." Robert murmured his thanks, his heart thumping with both nerves and anticipation. He took the elevator up, mildly jittery as he remembered the items tucked carefully inside his suitcase. Tucked behind his freshly pressed suits were a tailored skirt suit with a pencil skirt, a pair of heeled shoes, and a few blouses that he had been looking forward to wearing in private. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself that no one would suspect a thing. After all, he was just another guest at a busy hotel. When the elevator doors parted, he made his way down the hallway, whose muted carpet swallowed the sound of his footsteps. The slight hum of air conditioning followed him until he reached his room. A quick swipe of the keycard, a small flash of green, and the door clicked open. He pulled his suitcase over the threshold and was greeted by the newness of a freshly cleaned space. Crisp linens, a polished desk, large windows with a nighttime skyline shimmering in the distance. Robert wasted no time. After a day of traveling, he wanted to settle in right away. He locked the door with a sturdy click, then switched the deadbolt. His usual ritual started with a sense of relief and freedom. Here, free of the constant weight of expectation, he would become Roberta. The name floated in his mind with a certain softness. He carefully unpacked his professional clothes first, hanging them in the closet so they wouldn't crease. Then, from the bottom layer of his suitcase, he took out the other items that made his pulse quicken: the tailored suit jacket with a matching pencil skirt, a pair of black heels, and a few accessories he enjoyed wearing. He checked his watch. There was still time before any of his scheduled business engagements the next morning. Eagerly, he walked to the bathroom, flicked on the light, and stared at himself in the mirror. He noted the gentle wrinkles around his eyes, a reminder of many busy years. He set aside each carefully chosen garment on the bathroom counter. Then, in a series of careful moves, he changed out of his button-up and slacks and into the crisp white blouse he had brought. The sensation of the smooth fabric made him exhale. He slipped on the pencil skirt, checking its fit in the mirror, adjusting the waist and ensuring the hem fell just above his knees. Stepping into his heels, he tested his balance, quietly relishing that subtle boost in height. For a moment, he raised his chin at the reflection. The jacket made it a complete outfit, reminiscent of a professional office look, but with a sleek feminine touch. Dark brown hair, trimmed in a short, masculine style, now framed a face that glowed with a certain new confidence. He applied a hint of light foundation, just enough to even out his complexion. A tinted gloss came next. He had grown skilled with practice, especially these last few years of traveling. He knew how to keep it minimal enough that it was easy to remove later, yet meaningful enough to shape a different version of himself. Standing there in front of the mirror, he felt a tension drain from his body. Some people found relaxation in reading, others in music. For Robert, it was these moments when a sense of calm enveloped him. He gathered his old clothes, ready to stow them away discreetly. Only then did he notice the swirling gurgle of his stomach. He was hungry. He had neglected dinner in the rush to leave home and get to the hotel. It was tempting to remain dressed as Roberta, but the thought of walking to the restaurant in the hotel lobby like this made his heart pound in a decidedly anxious way. He wasn't ready for that. It felt much too risky in a place where, for all he knew, his co-workers might also be staying. He took out a hotel menu from the desk, scanning its options. "Room service might be best tonight," he murmured, smoothing a hand down the front of his blouse. He could keep the outfit on, enjoy it in the privacy of his room, and have a relaxed meal. But there was a critical detail. He needed to ensure complete privacy. Any staff member arriving at his door could see him in his female attire, which would cause the exact kind of embarrassment he hoped to avoid. He read the instructions for in-room dining. Dial the extension, place an order, and wait. Sometimes they delivered the tray directly inside. Sometimes they just left it. Perhaps he could slip on a robe when they arrived and pretend he had just gotten out of the shower. Then again, maybe skipping dinner was the easiest route, but his stomach churned uncomfortably at that idea, and the pang of hunger ultimately won out. He chuckled at his own nervousness. "Get a grip, Robert," he murmured. He slipped off his heels, switched back to his socks, then removed the jacket. The crisp skirt was still on, but at least from the waist up he would appear normal if he only cracked the door a few inches. Confident that the staffer wouldn't see his lower body, he decided that was enough precaution. He dialed room service. "Hello, I'd like to order the grilled chicken sandwich with a side salad, and some sparkling water, please." "Yes, Mr. Martin. It'll arrive in about half an hour." He thanked them and hung up. With a quick pivot, he flipped the Do Not Disturb sign on the door handle. Then he double-checked the lock, a small twist of the deadbolt to ensure no one walked in unannounced. Convinced that he had done everything to maintain his privacy, he settled into the armchair near the window, letting the city lights shimmer in the distance. He scrolled through news on his phone, partly distracted by the pleasurable feeling of the skirt's snug fit around his legs. Precisely 25 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a call from room service. "Hello, Mr. Martin? I'm here with your order. Shall I leave it by the door, or would you like me to bring it inside?" He swallowed, heart lightly pounding. "That's fine. I'll grab it myself. Thank you." He ended the call, shuffled to the door, cracked it open just wide enough to extend a hand. "Thank you," he said softly, meeting the eyes of a young staff member with a bright smile and a name tag that read, Monica. Monica nodded, handing the bag over. "Have a good night." She looked as though she wanted to ask if there was anything else, but Robert offered a polite, quick smile and shut the door. He let out a relieved breath, set his food on the desk, and felt the tension leak away. Dinner was a quiet affair, just him, the sandwich, and a subdued sense of comfort that he could maintain his secret. He changed back into the blouse and slipped on his heels again, feeling an odd sense of relief in returning to that persona for the evening. Eventually, He removed his makeup, set out his outfit neatly, and turned in for the night. The next day came swiftly. Morning sunlight pooled through the windows as Robert dressed in his standard business suit, a navy blazer, white shirt, and matching trousers. He checked the time, drank a quick coffee from the in-room machine, and headed down to the conference area. Meetings, presentations, and corporate mingling filled the next 8 hours. There were introductions to new clients, a few jokes exchanged with colleagues, and a lunch break that featured a surprisingly delicious buffet. All the while, in the back of his mind, Robert found himself itching for the next moment he'd have alone in his room, free to become Roberta again. When the day's events finally wrapped, the late afternoon sun was dipping behind tall office towers outside the hotel. Robert made polite goodbyes, exchanging business cards with new acquaintances, then headed up to his room. He locked the door behind him with a renewed sense of excitement that might have seemed odd to anyone else. But to him, it was a treasured ritual he could not enjoy at home. He returned to the bathroom mirror for another transformation. This time he placed a pair of stockings on his legs, carefully running his hands over the material to smooth out any wrinkles, then tugged on the fitted skirt. It hugged his hips, and he took a moment to appreciate the way it flattered his frame. A soft black blouse, a thin necklace, and the final touch, those black heels. He tried a subtle shade of lipstick this time, though the swirl of the tube in his hand brought on a wave of adrenaline. Carefully applying it, he noted how the subdued color highlighted the shape of his lips, making them appear fuller. He posed in front of the mirror, turning from side to side, adjusting the suit jacket. Although he wore a short, neat haircut, he felt comfortable with the resulting look. He told himself that, in a parallel universe, perhaps he would dress this way every day. And maybe in that alternate world, it would be perfectly routine, no different than tying a tie for someone else. A short, gentle beep alerted him to his phone's ring. He glanced at the screen. It was a call from a coworker, someone from out of state he had scheduled a short discussion with about the next morning's presentation. The phone showed Logan's name. Without a second thought, Robert answered in his regular voice. "Hey, Logan, what's up?" "Robert, quick question. Did you receive the latest data sets for tomorrow's session? They apparently emailed them out, but mine's incomplete." Robert turned the conversation on speakerphone so he could keep it hands-free, stepping around to the desk. "I got them, but there may have been some files missing. Let me check my email. Hang on." He tapped at his laptop. The jacket pulled a bit snug around his shoulders as he leaned over. He became so engrossed in scanning his inbox that he didn't notice the faintest rattle at the door. He had forgotten to replace the Do Not Disturb sign earlier. Even worse, he had only engaged the standard door lock, not the deadbolt. And in the hallway, housekeeping was making evening rounds, ensuring rooms were stocked with fresh towels and toiletries. As Robert shuffled through files, Logan kept speaking. "I'm worried we might have to request them directly from the main office. The analytics folder is entirely missing." Suddenly, the door creaked open just a sliver. Robert heard the click of a keycard from behind. He turned his head, eyes wide. Before his mind could register fully, the door inched open a fraction more, revealing a curious face peering in. A woman in a housekeeping uniform froze in the doorway, eyes going wide at the sight of Robert in a skirt and heels. She clutched her cleaning supplies card in one hand, her mouth slightly open as though she had walked into a moment she was absolutely not prepared for. Robert stood like a statue, phone still pressed to his ear, Logan's distant voice chirping from the speaker. He saw that the housekeeper was momentarily unable to react. Then, as if her limbs remembered how to move, she let out a quiet gasp. She must have realized she'd made a mistake and that the room was indeed occupied. She stepped back, letting the door close gently, though not before a flash of recognition passed between them. For a split second, Robert thought he might have imagined it, but the sound of the door's latch clicking shut made it undeniably real. His body stiffened with dread. He ripped the phone from his ear and rushed to the door, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the rest of Logan's words. Engaging the deadbolt, he pressed his forehead against the door, trying to steady his breathing. "Robert, you still there?" came Logan's voice through the phone in his hand. He raised the phone back to his ear, voice trembling slightly. "Yeah, sorry about that. I thought someone just came in." He cleared his throat, feeling a jolt of panic. "Give me a minute." Frantic thoughts flooded his mind. The housekeeper had clearly seen him, top to bottom, in a pencil skirt and high heels, hair short, but face lightly made up. The realization that she had glimpsed him like this sent a flush of heat through his body. "Robert? Everything okay?" Logan asked, sounding slightly concerned. "Yeah, everything's fine," Robert lied. "Look, can I call you back? I need to handle something real quick." "Sure, no problem." He ended the call and stood, staring at the door. The entire encounter had lasted maybe 3 seconds, but those seconds felt like a lifetime. What if the housekeeper told someone? Hotels had staff that worked in shifts. Perhaps word might spread among them about a man in 1427 wearing women's clothing. He felt an urgent need to do damage control. But how? He sank onto the edge of the bed, fidgeting with the hem of his skirt. His mind spun with 1,000 scenarios. The housekeeper might shrug it off, or she might gossip with her colleagues. He wondered if he should call the front desk and insist that no one come in without knocking. But that might raise suspicion. Possibly he was overthinking, but the sense of mortification remained. After several minutes of pacing, he reminded himself that there was no reason for the housekeeper to tell the entire hotel. Maybe she was professional enough to keep quiet. He decided to try and salvage the evening. First, he changed back into his usual clothes, which only intensified a growing heaviness in his chest. With a sigh, he placed the skirt, blouse, and heels into his suitcase, carefully folded. Then he removed his makeup with practiced efficiency, ensuring no traces remained. If anyone came by again, he'd appear entirely ordinary. He paced the room, glancing at the door occasionally. He expected a knock, perhaps a forced apology, or a half-excuse from housekeeping, but none came. Evening gave way to darkness, and Robert found himself distracted, rechecking the hallway through the peephole. He called Logan back, tried to focus on work details, but the conversation blurred into a background haze. Eventually, he ended the call and sank onto the bed, flicking through TV channels to fill the tension in the room. The next morning dawned with a sense of apprehension. Robert dressed for his meetings, triple-checking that every piece of evidence of his other persona was locked away. Before leaving, he draped the "Do Not Disturb" sign outside the door, reaffirming the deadbolt with a twist of his wrist. He had to get a handle on this feeling of paranoia. He took the elevator down to the breakfast buffet, eyes flicking around for any sign of a housekeeper in a crisp uniform who might recognize him. Everything seemed normal. Dozens of guests lined up for eggs and coffee, reading newspapers or scanning their phones. Robert forced himself to appear casual, selecting a small plate of fruit and toast. Still, each time he spotted someone with the hotel staff uniform, his gut clenched. At one point, a woman with short black hair passed by, wearing a uniform identical to the one worn by the housekeeper who'd walked in. Robert nearly spilled his coffee. She glanced at him, looking simply polite and professional, then kept walking. He breathed out, relieved it wasn't her. Or was it? He had been too panicked to capture every detail of the housekeeper's appearance, other than that she seemed about his age. He finished breakfast quickly and hurried to the conference rooms. Throughout the day, as he sat in presentation after presentation, Robert found it nearly impossible to remain fully present. Nervous scenarios kept looping through his thoughts. Maybe the housekeeper had reported it to her supervisor. Maybe he'd receive a call from hotel management. If he had forgotten to relatch the deadbolt the night before, might he forget again? Would someone open the door at a worse time? He tried to calm himself. There was no evidence that anyone knew or cared. He had seen no sign of gossip, no strange stares from the front desk. The best approach was to keep a low profile. He still had 2 nights left in his reservation. Maybe, if he was careful, this whole trip could proceed without further complications. After the day's conference concluded, Robert walked through the lobby, planning to relax in his room and maybe forego wearing Roberta's clothes altogether. The risk felt too high, but the urge to do so swelled inside him, battling the fear. This was one of the few times a year he could embrace that side of himself. It seemed a shame to cut it short out of panic. He weighed the decision in the elevator. The thought of giving up an entire evening of wearing what he wanted tugged at him. But the fear of discovery tugged right back. Ultimately, he compromised. He would dress for only an hour, in a locked bathroom if necessary, just to maintain that small piece of freedom. Then he'd make absolutely certain the door was locked. Perhaps he'd even block the door with the desk chair. Back in the room, Robert paused to meticulously check the door. He slid the deadbolt over with an audible click, then placed the Do Not Disturb sign on the doorknob outside. Just for good measure, he flipped the additional lock on the inside, though it was typically used only when you were inside to prevent entry. Satisfied, he allowed himself to exhale and began his transformation once more. He took a deep breath, rummaging through the suitcase, taking a pastel blouse that he hadn't worn yet. He paired it with a flowing black skirt that fell just past his knees. The shoes this time were a pair of shorter heels, more modest in height. With each item of clothing, he felt tension give way to a softer, calmer presence. Once changed, he checked his hair in the mirror, running a small comb over it. He chose a hint of eyeshadow, a bit of blush, and a light lipstick that gave him a hint of color. Stepping around the room, he tested the swish of the skirt. A half-nervous smile spread on his face. Then, remembering his vow to remain vigilant, he dragged the small desk chair over to wedge it beneath the doorknob. It was a clumsy setup, but it made him feel safer. He rehearsed in his mind how he would respond if someone knocked. "Yes, I'm busy. Please come back later." Nothing more. No opening the door. He had half a mind to keep the chain lock on as well. Yet, as the minutes passed and no one intruded, Robert relaxed a bit. He turned on the TV, flipping to a movie channel. The swirl of background noise kept him company as he spread out paperwork on the bed, reviewing presentation notes for the next day. Occasionally, he paused to admire his painted nails. He had used a quick drying polish this time. He felt a surge of satisfaction that he could juggle business tasks while in the clothes that made him feel so at ease. In a moment of hunger, he debated ordering dinner again from room service. But remembering the close call from the previous night, he opted for an alternative. He had grabbed some takeout earlier, just a small salad and fruit from a convenience store near the conference center. He retrieved them from the mini-fridge, along with a bottle of water. He ate quietly, flicking his gaze every few minutes to the door. Nothing stirred, no footsteps in the hallway that sounded unusual. After tidying up, Robert eventually decided to change back. He had promised himself only about an hour, and although he wished he could remain dressed for longer, the memory of the housekeeping intrusion was too fresh. Later in the evening, he changed into a simple t-shirt and pajama bottoms before climbing into bed. Sleep did not come quickly. He found himself replaying the earlier moment of panic. The housekeeper's startled face haunted him. Somewhere in the swirl of his thoughts, he wondered if she was upset or if she didn't care. He chastised himself for being so careless with the door. He vowed to be more cautious the next day. Morning arrived, and Robert could no longer avoid housekeeping. His towels needed replacement, and he wanted more coffee pods for the in-room machine. He also didn't want his linens changed, so an early call to the front desk was in order. After finishing a quick shower, he dressed in his everyday suit. He dialed the front desk, clearing his throat. "Hello? This is Robert Martin in room 1427. I'd like to request a couple of extra towels and coffee pods, but I don't need the room cleaned today." A cheerful voice replied, "Certainly, Mr. Martin. We'll send someone up shortly with what you need." He thanked them and hung up, heading straight for the door to ensure it was unlocked for a moment. He nearly opened it, then realized he needed to check his reflection one last time. He didn't want to appear flustered or suspicious. Satisfied that he looked plain enough, he propped the door open with the swinging security latch so that housekeeping could drop off items without fully entering. A few minutes passed, and then there was a gentle knock. He approached cautiously. Peering through the small gap, he recognized a housekeeping cart. The person delivering his items was the same young staff member from room service the first night, Monica, not the woman who had interrupted him. Still, he felt a twinge of worry that perhaps they spoke to each other. She offered him a warm smile and handed over a small bundle of towels and a couple of coffee pods in a paper bag. "Here you go, Mr. Martin. Let us know if you need anything else," she said. He returned her smile awkwardly. "Thank you, that's all. I appreciate it." She turned to walk away. Robert shut the door, exhaling relief that his short interaction had been uneventful. Still, his mind lingered on whether Monica had heard anything about him. There was no sign in her expression that she knew. She looked friendly, no different than any other day. He told himself that if the housekeeping staff had truly wanted to make a fuss, he would have heard about it by now. Complaints or rumors typically traveled quickly in service environments. Perhaps the woman who had walked in thought it was best to pretend the incident never happened. Robert clung to that hope as he went about his day. That afternoon's conference session required him to present. He delivered slides on emerging market strategies to a room of about 30 people. Normally he would be calm and confident, but he sensed his voice shaking as he spoke into the microphone. The earlier tension weighed on him, making him worry that his nerves would be visible to the group. He tried to remind himself that no one in that conference room knew what had happened the previous day. They had no idea about the concealed pencil skirt in his luggage. He managed to push through, though by the end of the session he was drenched in relief. When the final break came, a middle-aged woman named Colleen from the corporate office approached him. "Robert, you did an excellent job explaining those analytics. Thank you. You looked a bit tense at first, but you pulled it together nicely." "Thanks," he said, forcing a small grin. "Just feeling the pressure, I guess." "Well, you handled it well. I think everyone here learned a great deal from your insights." He nodded, exchanging pleasantries, grateful at least that it seemed no one suspected a thing beyond normal stage jitters. Later, he grabbed a quick dinner with a couple of colleagues at a small Italian place near the hotel. He forced himself to engage in light-hearted conversation about sports, travel, and management styles, but his mind never fully left the simmering concerns. By the time he got back to his room, it was nearly 8 in the evening. He decided that, for his last night in the hotel, he would be extremely careful if he dressed again. Double locks, sign on the door, perhaps even the chair wedge. He told himself to keep it low-key, maybe for only a short while, to avoid any further brushes with staff. As soon as he stepped in, he locked everything as planned. Then he hung the "Do Not Disturb" sign firmly on the door handle. Fumbling through his suitcase, he set aside a comfortable knee-length skirt, a simple long-sleeved blouse, and a pair of flats rather than heels. He felt less flamboyant with flats, in case he needed to move quickly if a situation arose. He also decided on minimal makeup, something he could wipe off in seconds if someone unexpectedly knocked. He changed quickly, but a nervous tension accompanied every motion. He glanced at the door every so often, reassuring himself that it was locked. Once dressed, He walked to the window. The city lights blinked in the dark, a mesmerizing sprawl of neon and office windows. Part of him regretted not being able to simply step outside in this attire and feel the evening breeze on his legs. But that remained far too risky here, surrounded by conference attendees who might recognize him, or staff who might talk about him. His phone buzzed with a notification from an app reminding him of the next day's checkout time. He tapped it off, returning his gaze to the window. He told himself that once he got home, it would be much harder to find a moment like this again. At the same time, he felt an odd chill, remembering that he was still in public lodging, a place he'd almost been caught. Or maybe he had been, depending on how one defined caught. That memory sent goosebumps over his arms. He pulled a blanket from the bed, draping it over his shoulders as he curled into the chair near the window. He tried to indulge in a simple pleasure, reading a novel he'd brought along. The storyline was engaging enough, a historical drama with complex characters. For a while he lost himself in those pages, letting his mind drift from the tension. He looked down at his legs, clad in stockings, and felt a warm sense of calm. This was a part of who he was, even if he couldn't fully share it with the world. Time slipped by, and exhaustion from the day's events crept in. Around 10, he decided it would be wise to change back, to avoid any last-minute housekeeping visits early the next morning. He quietly slipped off the skirt and blouse and put on his usual pajamas. He stored the cross-dressing items in the bottom of his suitcase, beneath extra shoes, ensuring they were concealed. He had one more fleeting thought of the woman who had opened the door. He wished he could know if she was all right, if she had felt embarrassed or concerned. Part of him wanted to say, "I'm sorry for startling you," or "Please don't worry about what you saw." But that was impossible to do without risking more exposure. The best course seemed to be letting it go. With that decision, he drifted off to a fitful sleep. The next morning arrived. Robert woke early, heart pounding at the idea of leaving. He wanted to check out without incident, so he made a plan. Pack efficiently, go downstairs, handle the final bill, and get on the road. His flight was scheduled for early afternoon, so time was tight. He showered quickly and carefully repacked his suitcase, placing all evidence of Roberta at the bottom, folded and wrapped in a small plastic bag. He left out only his necessary toiletries and a change of clothes for the trip home. A light knock at the door startled him mid-pack. "Housekeeping," came a woman's voice. "Do you need any help or want me to collect the linens?" He froze, wide-eyed. Was it her? He hesitated, heart drumming in his ears. No, I'm fine, thank you," he called out, making sure his tone was neutral. "I'm checking out soon. I'll be gone in an hour or so." "All right, have a nice day," she said, and footsteps receded down the hall. Robert exhaled so forcefully it felt like his lungs might collapse. He stared at the door, thankful it had remained closed. Another part of him felt sorrow for being so on edge, but he reminded himself that caution was necessary. When the clock read just past 8, Robert took a final glance around the room. It looked pristine, everything packed up. He rolled his suitcase out the door and down the hall, feeling oddly lighter and heavier at the same time. The relief at leaving behind a place where he had almost been discovered was palpable, but so was the regret that he had spent the last 2 nights in fear. He passed a couple of housekeepers pushing carts near the elevator bank. His breath caught as he avoided eye contact. None of them seemed to react, though he couldn't be sure if any recognized him. He stepped quickly into an open elevator and rode it down to the lobby. At the front desk, a cheerful staff member greeted him. "Good morning, Mr. Martin. Checking out?" "Yes," Robert replied, offering a polite smile. "Anything else I need to do?" "No, sir. Everything is in order. I see you had a 4-night stay. Everything charged to the card on file?" "That's correct. Thank you." He tried to keep his tone casual, meeting the staffer's eyes in a show of confidence. If there had been any rumors about him, it was not obvious at this moment. The staffer handed him a printout. "Here's your receipt. We appreciate your stay at the Maplewood. We hope you come again." Robert forced another faint smile. "Thank you. Have a good day." He took the receipt and folded it into his jacket pocket. With that, he was free. The swish of the automatic doors ushered him back outside. The city's hum greeted him, and he took a moment to breathe in the crisp morning air. He hailed a cab to the airport, looking out the window at the skyline he would leave behind. His mind replayed the moment when that housekeeper had peered in. It had all happened so fast, but the memory remained sharp. Even now, some part of him dreaded that a rumor might be floating around that hotel. Yet he had to remind himself that once he was gone, he was unlikely ever to see those employees again. At the airport, Robert moved through security, found his gate, and sat waiting. The announcements and clamor of travelers formed a backdrop to his thoughts. He saw families juggling suitcases, business travelers tapping away at laptops, and tourists wearing bright t-shirts. He wondered how many others carried secret parts of themselves that they only revealed in private. He tapped his foot anxiously, scanning the crowd. Boarding began, and Robert stepped onto the plane. He found his seat, stowed his bag overhead, and sat down by the window. As the plane lifted off, he gazed down at the city's streets and buildings shrinking below. This trip had taught him something about caution, about the risk involved in these moments of dressing as he preferred. It also left him unsettled. He felt as though he would spend the next few days constantly looking over his shoulder, worried about whether that glimpse of him had found its way online or into the rumor mill. It probably wouldn't. Rationally, he knew that. Yet anxiety clung to him like a stubborn shadow. After landing, he disembarked, retrieved his luggage, and made his way to the parking area for the final leg of the journey home. His mind was already thinking of the usual tasks waiting for him: restocking groceries, sorting through a mountain of emails, paying bills. He settled into the driver's seat of his car and started the engine. He looked in the rearview mirror and let out a long sigh. The face staring back at him wore a slight frown, lines of worry around the forehead. That face was still Robert's, but he couldn't help thinking about how it had looked in the hotel mirror when he was dressed in a suit skirt and heels. Two very different images of the same person, each representing aspects of himself that he kept carefully compartmentalized. As he drove from the airport onto the freeway, he tried to focus on a sense of relief that no immediate crisis had exploded from the incident. Yes, there had been that horrifying moment, but he was mostly unscathed, just more guarded, more aware of how easily privacy could slip away. The road stretched out in front of him, lined with green signage and dotted with other cars. He turned on the radio, letting soft music fill the silence. For the next half hour, he simply drove, allowing the familiar routes to guide him back toward his suburban neighborhood. Tall office towers gave way to rows of small businesses, then houses with neat lawns. Finally, he pulled into his driveway, the wheels crunching on the gravel. Home again, with all the usual routines awaiting him. He unloaded his suitcase, lugged it up the front steps, and unlocked the door. The house was silent, just as he had left it. He kicked off his shoes and set them beside the door. His gaze traveled to the living room, where a cozy chair stood waiting. His first thought was to unpack and do a load of laundry, but he paused. The memory of the hotel lingered with surprising intensity. Part of him wanted to bury all reminders of that close call, to ensure no one found out. Another part quietly yearned for the comfort he felt in those clothes, that short respite from the ordinary. He carried his suitcase to the bedroom, carefully removing the standard items first: shaving kit, dress shirts, business documents, setting them aside for cleaning or filing. Then he reached the plastic bag containing the skirt, blouse, and shoes he had worn so briefly. His breath hitched. He pulled them out gently, checking for any wrinkles. Running his fingertips over the fabric, he remembered the calm it gave him. He placed them in a discreet storage bin he kept tucked in a corner of his closet, hidden behind suitcases and a stack of folded blankets. With the items stowed away, he sealed the bin, giving it one last silent look before sliding it into place. Over the following days, Robert wrestled with lingering paranoia. He found himself checking the hotel's website, looking at reviews or news stories, worried that some stray mention might appear. Nothing did. He debated calling the hotel to see if everything was all right, but that would only seem suspicious. Ultimately, he decided the best course was to move on. At work, colleagues praised his presentations from the conference. Some asked if he had enjoyed the city nightlife, if he had gone sightseeing. He answered politely, feigning a casual mention of dinner with coworkers, trying not to reveal anything unusual. Each time a coworker quipped, "So, anything interesting happen?" He froze up inside, but outwardly he forced a chuckle and said, "Not really, just the usual business trip stuff." A week passed, and his life seemed to return to its established routine. No scandalous phone calls, no strange looks from neighbors. He stuck to his usual patterns, but that quiet memory remained. In a small slice of time, behind a locked hotel room door, he had stepped into a different version of himself. And for a few heart-stopping seconds, that sanctuary had been intruded upon. He also couldn't shake the image of the housekeeper's startled eyes. He reflected on the service industry, how overworked and busy they often were, how they likely had far more pressing matters than guests' clothing choices. But the possibility that one worker might talk to another haunted him. More than once, he found himself pulling up the hotel's website on his phone, scanning staff photos to see if he recognized her face. The website was generic, featuring only a few department heads, no housekeeping staff. He tried to quell his curiosity, telling himself it was better not to pry any further. In quieter moments, alone in his bedroom at night, he felt an urge to pull out that outfit again and slip into it. Yet each time he pictured that door cracking open, pictured a flash of horror in someone's face, and he hesitated. The memory was enough to leave him unsettled, so he buried the impulse for the time being. Still, life moved forward, and as the weeks turned into months, the sting of that near exposure softened. He reminded himself that he would likely have another conference in a new city eventually, a different hotel, a fresh chance for privacy, but he also promised himself that next time he would be more vigilant with the locks, more certain to keep the door completely secured. In the end, the memory remained a complicated knot of embarrassment and uneasy relief. No one had confronted him, no phone calls had demanded an explanation, and no malicious rumors had surfaced at work. He continued with his corporate responsibilities, took on new projects, and performed his duties with the same professionalism he always had. Yet each time he traveled for business afterward, a flicker of worry lit up inside him as he inserted the keycard to a new room. Before he even placed his suitcase on the floor, he made it a habit to engage the deadbolt and flip the security latch, stepping outside just long enough to place the "Do Not Disturb" sign firmly on the knob. Only then would he exhale. Only then would he quietly remove those carefully packed clothes from his luggage, determined to claim that small window of peace where he could be who he wanted to be, if only for a few hours. And though the risk still lingered in the background, he found that, with each trip, his sense of caution was sharper. The memory of that housekeeper's fleeting glimpse of Roberta reminded him that nothing was guaranteed, that even the most careful planning could slip up for a moment. But those precious minutes in front of the mirror, adjusting a skirt's waistband, sliding on heels, and looking at the reflection that felt somehow more complete, still beckoned, impossible to ignore. He would always carry that mixture of thrill and fear. And each time he closed that hotel door behind him, he would be reminded of the day a twist of a doorknob turned his private world into something far less certain, leaving him forever on guard.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.